think it should be working now. So, all right. So, yes, this is about the sounds of Wilderplace. Wilderplace is a web-based puzzle adventure game. And let me just get my view sorted out here. Okay, and yeah, in Wilderplace, you're like a shaman tasked with bringing balance to a once idyllic divine garden. And I'm not going to share too much about the game itself, but I'll share some details. It's a story-driven puzzle game. It's got hand-drawn visuals, with even with custom fonts, and there's all kinds of features. And if you want to learn more about it, you can look on the website wilderplace.place. But for the purposes of this talk, it's built in the browser, and we're going to be targeting Electron initially for the release. And yeah, a little about the team. Salmon Bimo Benrud is the creator and the core programmer and artist, and he started this game as a passion project, and then invited along Tom and I. Tom is doing puzzles and writing and some visual direction, and I'm at the bottom there. My name's Micah, and I'm working on the audio programming and composition and a little bit of miscellaneous problem solving. A little bit more about myself. I'm a creative open source hacker, and I'm really into art and music and math. And I'm also doing some stuff with graphics, so it was exciting to hear David's talk a little bit. I'm gonna have to rewatch it after this. And yeah, I'm doing the audio programming and composition for Wilderplace. So a little backstory. Salmon is somebody who I grew up with, and he was working on this game, and he wanted to make it from scratch. And in the browser, and he is about 2 years in or more even, and there still wasn't any audio. So he invited me to work on the sound and the music. And of course I was like, yes, this is a chance to experiment. It was like a blank canvas to play with some ideas I'd been thinking about for a while around audio in the web browser. So just a little about the gameplay. Wilderplace is a turn-based game. It's like it's kind of like chess in some ways, but adventure chess. It has deterministic logic, and the state is fully reversible. So this is implemented with React and Redux and immutable JS, and that's all in the main thread. But I'm going to talk about the audio thread, what's happening in the audio thread. So in the talk abstract, I promised aspirations and challenges. So you'll see some of these little icons. That's the main player. So think like reach for the stars when it's aspirational, and when it's challenging, it's time for a nap to figure out like what to do next. So the first challenge was finding a synthesizer that worked well in the browser. And at first I thought we should use sound fonts because it's super flexible. We could do anything with sound fonts. But then I discovered WebDX7, and the Yamaha DX7 is a really nostalgic synth for me. My dad used to play saxophone along to DX7 sequence stuff, and it's just really versatile. So to figure out that there's this WAM web audio module that ran in the browser and it played real DX7 patches was very exciting. So it's based on work by Jari Klimola and Raf Levine. And my initial tests with this were a huge success. So Salmon's aspirational decision was to just forget about sound fonts. So I agreed with that idea, and we just the aspiration was to synthesize all the game audio just with the WebDX7. And I was also really impressed by WAM modules. So I wanted to write everything as a web audio module. But game dev ended up being more messy than I anticipated, and in the end, this didn't pan out. Still, web audio modules kind of showed me what was possible with audio worklet. So the next aspiration that emerged was to make the game audio feel like an extension of game state. And another thing I wanted to play with was, using so-called functional reactive programming to compose all the sound and the music. So I pulled out this reactive stream library that I really like called most.js, and I had a lot of success with this in the past. And at first I tried it in the main thread, knowing that that wasn't going to work, and it didn't work. So a first big challenge was accurate timing. The solution was, of course, to use the audio worklet thread. So here's, and don't worry about the code. You can look at this later if you want. I just wanted to put it up here. This is a brief example of how to use a Most.js reactive stream in an audio worklet processor. And you can see that there's not much to it. There's just this one little function that you have to call. And so getting this working was really exciting. And it opened up a lot of possibilities. A few details, like there's a Most.js scheduler that I was able to create based on something that Tyler Steinberger had written for testing. And basically, it works really well with Audio Worklet Processor. So you can check it out on GitHub if you'd like. And here's a quick example of how I'm using these reactive streams. And don't worry about the weird syntax. The important thing is it's kind of like a top-down flow. And we start off with getting some event data from the game. This is, and I just want to make sure my sound is working because hopefully my sound is working. It's making weird noise. Yeah, so we start off getting an event stream from the game, from the main thread, and then we turn it into a rhythm. Oops, we turn it into a rhythm here, and then we map that rhythm to some pitches, and then we just play it on the synth. And this kind of declarative API is like really useful. In the game, I'm using streams everywhere, not just to create notes, but to do all kinds of other things. So just a quick overview of how the architecture is. On the left, we got the main thread. It's doing all the UI stuff. And on the right, here's the audio thread. And there's one audio thread that we're accessing via audio worklet. In the main thread, Redux actions get triggered, and they do Redux React stuff. And I don't really know a whole lot about that part of the game. I've dealt with it a little. But the important thing is the Redux actions also get sent via message channel over to the audio thread and turned into most.js streams. And then those can get kind of queried and turned into other streams and transformed into notes and music. And then there's all this other stuff going on with streams. I've got all kinds of streams in the game. Just a few examples, musical data like Pitchclass sets and rhythms, game state updates, intermediate representations of game data, control streams and aggregates and all kinds of things that I was experimenting with. Sometimes it's got messy, other times it was really straightforward and clear. But yeah, I will say that programming with streams without types is pretty hard. And in the future, I'd probably like to use TypeScript or something, but we decided not to do that. And then, yeah, another challenge, organizing all these streams. You can't program your way out of organization. You have to sit down and figure out what you're trying to do, especially with something so flexible as a stream abstraction. There's a lot of information and a lot of choices to make. Wilderplace uses both pre-recorded MIDI and some generative musical data. So an aspiration was to blend these together. I'll just share briefly something that's exciting to me, which is this abstraction for making sure everything's in tune. Basically, it's like a pitch class leader and follower kind of thing where different streams can take turns controlling the current pitch class. If you're the pitch class leader, you get to play the bass notes and you get to play notes outside of the pitch class. If you're the pitch class follower, your notes get constrained to whatever the leader's pitch class set is, and your bass notes get filtered out. This really made it possible to blend lots of random stuff together, and it sounds pretty good. So another challenge, performance. So I really wanted the game to work on my phone, and I've been testing it here and there on the phone. Even though we're not targeting the phone initially, I wanted to make sure that what we were doing was roughly, possible to use on the phone. One of the big things that turned out to be an issue was garbage collection performance. If you have to do a lot of garbage collection at irregular times, web audio can sometimes stutter, and it's gotten way better now, but especially on Linux, this was a huge challenge. And actually, my phone was kind of performing better than Linux for a while. So one of the big problems I had was long-running streams that just held on to lots of references and never got cleaned up. So I learned early on that I needed to be cleaning up my stuff. So here's some tips and tricks that I learned along the way. Using the memory profiler in Chrome was really helpful, just to see what was going on. If I was able to avoid allocating lots of closures and lots of big objects in paths where things were getting called a lot, that made a huge difference. Memoizing frequently called functions was made a big difference, and I used a little library called Noise to do that. And yeah, just make sure stuff gets cleaned up regularly. So I broke up long-running streams, and I used higher order streams in a way that helped me ensure that things were cleaned up regularly. Another challenge was just stream debugging. Like, streams are super flexible and you can do all kinds of stuff and it works really good until it doesn't. And you have to figure out what went wrong. And one thing that happened a lot was that I would have these combo streams that one of the dependent streams didn't have a start event, and then it would hold everything up and nothing would work, and I didn't know what was going on. Okay, another aspirational thing was all these Chromium Linux web audio fixes that came along about halfway through my work, and it gave me a huge boost because I couldn't figure out what was going wrong, but all of a sudden everything worked. So that was great. And then another challenge, I started getting a lot of DX7 layers, a lot of synth layers, and everything sounded very magical, but the trailing noise would be very messy. So I wanted to use some gating or limiting to get rid of this, but web audio still doesn't have a gate. And I think it would be great if web audio had a built-in gate. I tried lots of workarounds. One of them was to use the Faust IDE. I made this like multi-band gate with the Faust IDE, and it was really great, and everything was going well. But then we started to get some crackling, and unfortunately, I had to cut it, and instead, I just went into the WebDX7 and added some simple gating and performance improvements directly, and that worked. So, yeah, a challenge with web audio is there's limits to sequential computation. So you just kind of have to work with the budget that you've got. Briefly, I'll just share about the mix. I'm pretty much pre-mixing everything using these pre-panned zones that have names. And like, if you want to play a sound, you send it to the zone. So you send it to, music distant left or actions right. This is using Tone.js to set up kind of all the flows for the mix. And I'm using lots of compression and convolution reverb to make everything blend nicely and sound good. And then last challenge that I had was using standard MIDI files as an exchange format. It just didn't have room for the kind of metadata that would be useful in the game. And it would be great if there was an XML-based exchange format. And thankfully, I was using Bitwig, and they released this exchange format called dawproject just in the nick of time. And it's XML-based, and I don't have a whole lot of time left, so I'm just going to show you all the things that I did with dawproject. It made it much easier to just sketch out some ideas and get them into the game engine. And here you can see it's basically a spreadsheet of different clips of MIDI. And yeah, I'm just about finished here, but I'll say what's next. The game's gonna be released, I think in August on Steam. I'd really like to open source more of the audio engine if I have time. If and when I have time, I should say. I'd like to eventually for sure. I want to iterate on the some of the abstractions from functional programming. Ideally, I'd like to be able to dynamically modify notes as they're playing, but I haven't quite gotten there yet. And I just want to do another pass to clarify like some of these patterns that came about in the game, maybe using a typed language. And I'll just say at the end here that I'm looking for new projects to work on. So yeah, that's it for this talk. And I would love any questions that you have now, and also feel free to reach out to me after the talk as well.
So, thanks, Micah. Maybe do you have a demo of your game?
There, I could, yeah. Let me just see if it's running right now.
Okay. Il y aura le son.
Let's see.
Il y aura le son.
This is like the current version that I'm working on, and I don't know if you'll be able to hear it, which is like the whole point. But
did you share your screen by checking audio? When you share your screen, you must check share audio.
Let me try this again.
Okay, stop sharing your screen and do it again.
Let's see. Share screen, share sound.
Yes.
All right. Okay, let's see here.
Okay, we should have sound now. No? Il n'y a pas de son? No sound? We cannot hear sound. Can you hear sound on your side? Qu'est-ce qu'il fait? Ouf, no, no. Oh. Just. Oh putain. Okay, we lost him, I think.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're back.
Okay, everything broke.
Okay. So the joys of hybrid conferences.
Oh no. My sound broke. Darn it.
Okay, so I'm sorry to have asked this question. It's very nice, these views.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry. When I shared my screen that way, it crashed everything. So, but there's if you want to see a demo, you can visit wilderplace.place, and there's a trailer.
Okay, so we'll share. Okay, can you share again your screen without the sound then, and just show the URL?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Okay, so I can say a few words because I played with this game, and the music is very nice. It's generative. A lot of contextual things happen, and the technological stack he used is very interesting because he used web audio plugins. The DX7 is a web audio module that is a reusable plugin, and he used many different technologies that he presented, and the result is really impressive for an independent game. Okay, so we cannot hear the sound. So
yeah, okay. Sorry, no sound this time, but you can kind of see how the beginning of the game is.
Oh yes, we can hear a little sound. No?
How can you hear some? It's muted now.
Okay, no.
Yeah, probably no sound, but Yeah, you can see it's like a little puzzle game. You have to balance out each board before you go to the next one.
Okay. So maybe we have questions anyway in the room because we must go on. So any question about Mika's work? Maybe you saw him in the Slack channel from time to time. Mika, are you here?
Yeah, I'm here.
What's happening? Okay, so I have a question myself.
Yeah,
Okay,
sure, go ahead.
because I'm maybe the only one who tried your game, so you said that you are using multiple instances of a DX7. Isn't it a bit overweighted solution for making music in a game, or how does it behave in terms of CPU usage and so on?
You know, it's pretty good, and I'm using something like 30 instances, I believe, and each one has like 16 voices. And I had to do some performance optimizations where I would put some voices to sleep um, if they're not being used. But it actually works really well on the phone, and I found that the WebDX7 is not the main performance bottleneck for the most part. I mean, there's a limit to how many voices you can have, so you know I definitely have to be mindful of that. But um, there are other performance things that are more important, especially garbage collection. That seems to be like the biggest thing.
Okay, and finally, you were happy with the DAW format exchange?
Yeah,
What's happening?
definitely. The dot format was really useful. And I don't know, you know, if it's going to be widely adopted, but for my purposes, it had all the data that I needed right there, and I was using XPath to get the data like whenever I needed it, and it was just much simpler than trying to fit everything into standard MIDI format.
Okay, okay. So thank you, Mika. I'll share the URL of your game on the website directly in the program because we've got some technical problems for sharing the sound and maybe the pictures too. Okay, thank you very much, Mika, and
Yeah,
thanks for having participated.
oh yeah, thanks for having me.